Morning, everybody, and very pleasant to have you join us for the 2019 fall season of the ICT Educator series. We took a little break for the summer, but we're back, and we're leading off with a wonderful presentation today, the Cisco update, which seems to have attracted attention from across the country, which is very pleasant. Cisco's been an industry partner of ours for a long time here in California, and we're very glad to have them here. But first, I'd like to say a few remarks about this series in general. On our next slide here, you can see some of the series presentations we gave last year, and that was our first year. And sometimes attendance, should have been more than it was because we had some really incredible topics. But fortunately, Nicole Sherman, our producer, has been able to capture all these on our website in video, and then chapterize the video, so you can go to any part of the video that you like. Also, the entire text of the presentations has been put into a transcript, so you can use that as well. I know lots of you have grants and different things, or you need information for your classes or whatever. There's a lot of really rich stuff here, so it's a tremendous value, and we hope that you will use it and tell us about your experience. Also this summer, Nicole was able to reach out to the attendees of all the sessions that we had, and others that on our extensive constant contact list, and determined that what our webinar customers or participants really enjoy are career technical education programs about marketing and outreach, skills and certifications needed by employers, virtual labs, and dual enrollment. So with that in mind, we developed our fall schedule to include those topics and bring in some very wonderful industry experts to talk to you about it. So our fall webinar series is on our website, I think through just about Christmas. We've got a few holes to fill, but for the next few sessions, we'll be covering our NetLab virtual lab updates next week. The following week, we'll be looking at the cybersecurity activities for your campus, or the K-12s that are near your campus that are particularly fun these days to help introduce and engage students in cybersecurity. We're also the next week, we'll be looking at certification centers on campus where you can certify. We had a study done recently that helped us identify best practices in certification. So we look forward to having that soon. But today, we're talking about the Cisco update. And as I mentioned, Cisco's been a partner for a long time, and we're very interested in hearing that. And obviously, there's a lot of you out there that are interested. A lot of what we know about Cisco and the way our faculty engages with the curriculum is through the Western Area Support and Training Center. Richard Grotegut and Karen Stanton, who are both on the call today, represent that. And they're pretty much the face of Cisco for a lot of our people on our campuses. And we thank them extensively for what they do and their annual conferences. I believe the next one will be the winter conference in January 6th and 7th. And I'm going to go ahead and in a moment turn it over to Richard Grotegut to introduce our guest for today. But Richard's a pretty special person too. He's been teaching for years in the community college system, recently retired, and not only does he do double duty like Karen in the Western Area Support Training Center, but he's also the Bay Area Regional Director for Industry Engagement for the California Community Colleges. So he has a very important role now, giving back from all his knowledge over the years. And I'm very happy that we're on the same team doing that. So with that little introduction to Richard, I'd like you to go ahead and take over and introduce our guest from Cisco.
Well, thank you very much, Steve, and thanks for the great introduction. And it's a great opportunity. Let's see if am I sharing my screen for you right now, or let's see that. Let me try to do that.
I don't see the content yet.
There we go. I got it. All right. Yeah, this is. I'm getting a little bit. You talk about my years of experience. I'm getting a little nostalgic about the Cisco Academy program, and this, the 2020 CCNA version 7, which I'm finding to be a very welcomed update. And I've been through many updates over the years, and I was just thinking back, this coming November will mark my 22nd year with the Network Academy program when I first got my instructor training. And I was going back and reflecting on the content and how it's evolved and the different versions, because we're on version 7, so that's been 7 changes to the curriculum during my time with the Academy. And looking at some of the textbooks from those years, in 1999 there were 2. It was offered as a 2-year program. They had a first-year guide and a second-year guide, and then they continued that in 2002 with the update, and then in 3, community colleges got really very much involved and began teaching the courses as separate courses. So there was CCNA 1 and 2 and CCNA 3 and 4. Worked really well with the community colleges. We were able to fit those into 8-week courses and have students finish and get their certification prep all done in a academic year. Then the courses were divided. There was a textbook for each of the 4 courses, separate ones, on that version in 2008. Continued that way. Changes in the titles, changes in whether they learned routing with switching or routing and switching separately, and what happened to accessing the WAN and those technologies, to the present offering, version 6, which is, as I said, I'm welcoming the change. The version 6 has been around for a while. Industry and the technologies have changed a little bit, and I'm happy to see the change. Now, what's been happening over those years, though, is not only has the amount of courses changed, but really the content has changed, and each version change meant learning new things, keeping the old technologies and learning a lot of new things. And the amount of content that was added to each of those version updates became more and more difficult for our faculty to adjust to the academic schedule and prepare the training and get the courses ready. And you can see that the content increase ended up kind of focusing just on the CSET, because we just simply couldn't get the amount of content taught in a year's time to be able to prepare the students for that cert. So we like the CSEN certification academically, but in reality, it wasn't really embraced by industry very much. And so that's why I'm really kind of happy that kind of going back, Greg will talk about the focus now on CCNA as the entry-level cert, just like it was, in the beginning and for many years. And I know, Steve, you shared with me some Burning Glass data, and I was pretty impressed to see that today, 2019, Burning Glass, this was data just accumulated a week ago in California, and you can see that CCNA is at the top of the list. It's number 3 cert in greatest demand. CCNP is there too, by the way. So we're looking forward for changes in that as well. So I'm very happy to see the change, and it's my pleasure to introduce Greg Cote as the product manager of this change, and he's going to be helping us and talking about the changes in detail. And it's so great to have it coming directly from Cisco too. Karen and I can talk about the changes, but if we can hear it directly, from the horse's mouth, that's even better. So Greg's the project manager with the Network Academy organization. He's responsible for the networking technologies portfolio that includes the new CCNA and CCNP courses that are coming soon. And then what I was very impressed with Greg is that before joining the NetAcad team, he was with Learning at Cisco Group and responsible for the routing and switching certification track. And Cisco Learning and Cisco Network Academy, while both very much involved in training and education, have not always worked together. So I'm glad to see that change now. So it's my pleasure to introduce Greg. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, Greg, and allow you to share your slides.
Great. Thanks, Richard, and welcome, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity here to go over the CCNA program. Let me see if I can get my technical difficulties squared away.
Yeah, right at the bottom of the screen, there should be a share button.
There we go. Is it showing up?
We can see it.
Great. All right. See if I can get rid of my video, which is blocking my access. There, one sec. Guys, tell me how to move the video bar from the middle of the screen to some side or top. Is that just a Mac thing? All right. Well, I'll try to just read around it then. All right. Again, as Richard said, I've been in the Cisco in the certification side for go over 7 years before joining the Network Academy, and I've had a chance to see, you know, sort of the at the root, right, of how the certification portfolio has evolved over time. I loved Richard's representation there of the sickening page count over the last 20 years and the significant additions to the you know, every subsequent revision of the CCNA certainly felt like it was getting heavier and heavier weight. You know what, I can't, I'm sorry about this, but I've got to figure out a way to get this video.
You should be able to drag and drop it somewhere on the side.
Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. All right. So before I get started, so I've got this session kind of broken into two categories. One, I want to talk a little bit about the route that was followed to reach the CCNA, the new CCNA that just got announced back in June. And then I want to spend the majority of the time talking about, you know, what is the sort of state of the CCNA course development, talk about the implications to the instructor base, and just sort of drill into, you know, how far we are in terms of making this new courseware material available to you. But again, sort of behind the curtain, right, just to give people a sense of how do we get to a new certification and or a certification revision. So the sort of ingredients that go into went into this CCNA are shown here. And that is, people who are familiar with grading certifications probably are aware that there's a sort of a standard methodology around job role analysis and job task analysis, which is a sort of a data gathering process, right, with SMEs. In the case of the CCNA, though, we knew that really, as you see here, these two key summary points are, there was a little bit of a drifting, I'll just call it that, of the CCNA alignment to what employers and what the job role expectations were. It actually had crept up, and you know, as we showed in the earlier slide with the page count, it really got to be at a point where there was more subject matter in there and wasn't really aligned with what hiring managers were looking for. So we set out well before June, before the announcement. This process is probably over a year long. There was extensive, you know, focus groups, surveys, some targeted surveys with hiring managers, trying to get clarity on what is it that a new network administrator needs to bring into the job role, right? And what is it that the employer or the hiring manager expects to build upon? So first and foremost, again, we knew that there was a disconnect there. So realigning the CCNA to the employer expectations, and then this right sizing notion, right? So we have clearly there's a balance point, right? The certification represents an associate level. It needs to be comprehensive, and it needs to have a good blend of competencies that can be demonstrated, you know, knowledge and skills, as well as capabilities to do things, right? There has to be a sort of a balance of those two components. And now we knew also that there was new subject matter coming in, right? The big shift in network technology, the big shift in architectures meant that there needed to be some space, if you will, made for these new topics. And so that right sizing activity was key to being able to, again, make this certification fit in its proper spot and you know, remain as the premier networking certification. All right, so that gives you, again, just kind of sets the groundwork for, you know, what happened well before June. And then the underlying motivation for what I'm going to talk about in a second as the new network is digital transformation, right? Simply put, it's really just the application of technologies to create new business models. And this is at the root of all of what Cisco's been talking about for the last 4+ years, and is what is at the root of creating this need for a different skill set and a different focus. Now, some of the sort of at a 50,000 foot, some of the technologies that are supporting this digital transformation, and also just the evolutionary changes, right, that are going on in networks. Virtualization and cloud. If you could look back 5 years ago, these were just introduced and really new subject matters that existed in segments of the network, but not throughout. A big bet for Cisco is the adoption of 5G. There were the rollout and the adoption of 5G mobility, right? That's a scaling essential. And then automation, which really there's absolutely no way to, if you think about the device responsibilities of a network admin or a network engineer, going from hundreds of users and devices to, thousands to support this kind of scale increase, absolutely requires automation. So that, again, is a technology space or a skill area that just hasn't existed until, within the last 5 years in terms of being mainstream. And then things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, analytics, all of those tools and capabilities that come with this new architecture, again, link to what's driving the need for new skills and what's ultimately driving the changes that we made to the certification for the CCNA. Now, this is Cisco's view of the ingredients or the elements of what will make a digital transformation successful, right? This is what Cisco calls the new network. And really the 3 pillars of it are intent-based networking, right? Which is folks who are familiar with just a controller-based architecture, right? Cisco's been talking about intent-based networking now since 2016. The branded names for this are things like digital network architecture or application-centric infrastructure in the data center. So really, this is just all about a ability to take a business intent or IT's intent, right, convert that into policies, have those policies orchestrated and automatically configured into the network devices, and then a feedback loop so that the analytics can track what's going on and make any kind of corrective actions as needed. So that's a real shift in architecture that, again, drives new skills and requirements. Multi-domain networking, the second ingredient here, really is just about that policy, that business policy that needs to be deployed and invoked, not only in the campus, but needs to span across all network segments. So that's what's meant by multi-domain, is that ability to push the policy across all network segments right to the data center. And then programmability absolutely is a central ingredient with all of this. Cisco has been developing devices with programmable capabilities now for over 10 years. It's really doubled down in the release of the recent Catalyst 9K and all of the, you folks may be familiar with a lot of the different solutions that have come out that emphasize that, really software-defined X is the future. And so Cisco is focused on that. Again, what this all means is certification, the emphasis, the focus needs to make room and shift toward supporting these technologies.
Yeah, we stuck on the.
And then one last point here, just to kind of bring it home, is if we start to think about all of those new architectures and technologies, and what does that mean for the certifications, right? So these skill areas, right? Again, programming being central, really understanding even programming concepts, right? Which are central software-defined networks. As I mentioned, the multi-domain, those automation skills, that understanding of virtualization. Right now, there's a different mindset requirement in terms of provisioning devices, whether it's a physical device or a virtual device. Wireless, which is something that used to be in the CCNA, right, has come back front and center. There's absolutely no one working in a campus environment access network who doesn't have some, responsibility or some touch with wireless devices. And then again, this shift from, how do you actually interact with devices? So taking from today the command line interface perspective, shifting that to APIs. All of these, again, are think of them as the drivers that led to the changes in the CCNA. So let me click ahead here. So this is a big, busy chart. There's the announcement back in June encompassed the entire portfolio at all levels, right? But from a Netacad focus standpoint, we can zero in on the change to the associate level, right? The CCNA, which that level of the portfolio previously contained, or I should say up until next February, contains, other than routing and switching, several other CCNAs, right? The convergence of those into this new portfolio is key, was absolutely critical. And if you look at the composition of what's really branded now as just the CCNA, it's no longer CCNA routing and switching. It is the CCNA. It should be familiar, right? There's IP foundational topics and routing and switching occupy a huge portion of that blueprint. Security and network automation as well have been either added or increased. There's big changes that happen also at the professional level, right? There's multiple CCNPs where in order to earn those certifications, there's a 3 or 4 exam journey that individuals need to follow. That's been converged to a 2 exam framework. And what I think is one of the real sort of industry leading improvements is the complexity or the variedness of job roles, right, within enterprise, within data center, within service provider, really required us to go back and think about, can we make a one-size-fits-all certification for each of these technology spaces? And the answer was no, we can't, because there just isn't a single job role definition in these spaces. And so what's happened at the CCNP level is there are 2 exams. There's a core exam, and then there's a concentration exam, which you can think of as the optional exam. You can see multiple little bubbles there in the on the C column. So in that case, the individual everyone will take a similar core exam, and then the concentration will be the choice of the individual based on their industry or career focus. So those are the big changes to the CCNA and CCNP. And then you see at the bottom there this addition, right? There's a whole parallel track now related to the DevNet focused certifications, same level that mirrors the networking side, this associate, professional, and expert. And again, that DevNet associate is a new component, or is going to become a new component in the Netacad portfolio. So that's going to open up some opportunities hopefully for your academies and be appealing both as a complementary skill for networking focused folks as well as some of the developer folks. And then last on this is, I think if you've seen the announcements, you're familiar, there really is a key milestone where all of the different certifications flip from the current versions to the new replacements on February of 2020, February 24th to be exact. So that's as long as you can take those the existing certification exams. So obviously, when we talk about the transitioning the academies from the current curriculum to the new curriculum, that needs to be top of mind. And we understand, of course, that people can't turn on a dime. There's a administrative and operational aspect to this that we have to consider. And so we're going to work when we release this new courseware to make it possible for folks to bridge across, their academies to bridge across that date, and provide the incremental information to students who want to still pursue that CCNA certification, but need now to focus on the newer version. And then the last point here is for the academies who are delivering trainings associated with the CCENT, the CCNA 1 and 2 courses, July 31st of next year is the final date for those students to take that exam and to earn that CCENT certification. So these are the noteworthy dates. Another noteworthy date, which I probably should have put on here, I'm sure the instructors in the audience are interested, is when am I going to see this new content, right? So November is when we plan to release the courseware for the CCNA. We'll give you a specific date as we get further along in the development, but right now that is the time frame, and so that's when you're going to get exposed to it. But there's going to be opportunities to actually see what's changed and what's different before that. All right, so let me go from certification change to drill into the CCNA 7 itself. So what is new in this revision? Well, first, I think what's real important takeaway here is this represents what should be the familiar ground. The green space, or the green portion of this circle, is all around IP foundational topics, right? The domains of including network fundamentals, access, IP connectivity, and IP services. Everything in that set of domains comes from the CCNA routing and switching certification of today. So that is, again, that should be all familiar ground. And even some of the security fundamentals we have device security and topics like that already in the certification. Those are, there's an expansion in security, and there's obviously new topics around network automation that have come into the certification that will obviously be reflected in the trainings. But the good news here is that from a transition standpoint, the fact that there's a large amount of subject matter here that's familiar should help to make that transition successful and relatively painless. I know these aren't painless. Now, the first thing that was done when the new blueprint came out was the development team who develops the courses looked closely at the subject matter and made an assessment or scoped the total amount of material and quickly determined that, hey, there's a actual reduction in the subject matter from CCNA 6 to CCNA 7, even with this, what I showed earlier as the new content or new components around automation and the expansion and security. The overall, subject matter magnitude was reduced by about 25%. Now, how did this happen? If you think about the evolution and what Richard was sharing earlier, every time there was a revision, we would add something. We would add another dynamic routing protocol. We would add version 6 or V6 and V4 instances of that. We had multiple flavors of spanning tree. There was lots of technology topics where we just kept stacking alongside existing. And, again, going back to what does a hiring manager expect? Well, we don't know. There's no way to predict what everyone's going to be using from a dynamic routing protocol. So we took the approach, which was not the appropriate, to just sort of give it the kitchen sink, right? Make sure we cover all, which, from a technical hiring manager standpoint, really wasn't necessary, right? Well, they want someone who has understanding of what a dynamic routing protocol does or how spanning tree works, but they don't need to have complete competency on all different flavors of it. So taking those things down to what's essential, taking out some of the legacy WAN protocols and things that really are less and less predominant now, allowed the total amount of training to reduce by 25%. So from a student perspective, that can translate into a shorter path to job readiness, right? And really what this provides us is an opportunity to rethink the course packaging. What makes sense in terms of subject matter, how many courses, and what goes where. And so I should know this, but we just had a session with the partners last week, and there is a scope and sequence document that's been posted up to the netacad.com space. If it's not available now, it will be shortly. You can obviously take that as your first, as a way to do a comparison, do a delta analysis, and look at the changes that have gone on in these in this version 7. But at a high level, you can see in this list that from a change standpoint, course number 1, the intro networking course of today really is equivalent in version 7. So we're talking about minor refinements and minor updates. So folks who are familiar and have been teaching that course should pick up version 7 and pretty much seamlessly continue to move. Course number 2, right, is actually a convergence or a blending of the route switch essentials and scaling courses of version 6, plus some new topics, right? And the new topics specifically are the wireless related topics, and then some expansion of security topics. And then course number 3, version 7, is actually blending topics from 3 different courses in version 6, the route switch essentials, scaling networks, and connecting networks. So there's actual ingredients from all 3 of those, plus the new topics related to automation, network programmability, some VPN, and additional security topics. So course 1, very familiar, very virtually identical, except there are some interface and platform changes that I'll talk about in a minute. Course 2, significant change. Course 3, significant change from the past. But when I say significant change, I'm talking about course 2 comparing to course 2 of version 6. If you again go back to that wheel that I showed about the composition, the foundational topics that get brought into course number 2 from the route switch essentials and scaling. Again, if you've been delivering both of those courses, those should be familiar topics. So the amount of change, the amount of new material, right, that's in this revision is actually less than in going from 5 to 6. So just hopefully that sort of paints a picture of the extent of the changes and gives you a sense also of how things got mapped from the 4-course version 6 into the 3-course version 7. How am I doing on time here? I want to say obviously time for Q&A, but we've got some next level details here on the course outlines. This is the list of modules. Again, the scope and sequence document that I mentioned that's just been posted up to netacad.com. In that you can see the next level details, the topics, and the objectives for each of these modules. But again, from a summary standpoint, what are the ingredients of course number 1? Again, very familiar, hopefully, because it mimics Intro Networks version 6. Course number 2 is where there is, what you can see in this highlighted blue is where the changes are, or I should say where the new material is, right? New / significantly changed content, right? There we had some port security, or some, there were some security topics in the previous courses, but there's a significant enough change to where we're noting that as, or we're calling that new content. So if you look at course number 2 also, you can kind of see, except for the last couple of modules on routing, it's pretty much a layer 2 switching course, right? So that's one, at least a notional way to think about what course 2 is composed of. And then course number 3, again, the blending of three different version 6 courses of today, narrowing the focus, right, from IPv4, IPv6, the different dynamic protocols, etc. So it's a route-centric, network management-centric kind of course, and it has the new network automation, the things that we talked about earlier that are, sort of key in terms of exposing network administrators to software-defined networking, and bringing, sort of bringing them forward in that respect. So again, this is the module name summary. This is the sequence that they will be presented in, that you will be delivering the trainings in. But if you go to that scope and sequence document, you can see from that, you get insight into the key objectives, into the topics as well, in a lot more detail. All right, so let's go from the course composition. So let's talk about what this means from a lab standpoint. So the lab equipment bundles that are used in version 6 are still applicable in version 7. So that's, first and foremost is we're going to leverage the existing infrastructure that's out there. There was also a lot of discussions about the can we reduce the topologies and make this more affordable, right? And still have the right balance of complexity and develop the hands-on skills that we're looking for. So what you see here is that the current equipment list requires 3 router, 3 switch topology. The version 7 equipment list is reduced to 2 routers and 2 switches, right? So the topologies or the topics that required a 3 router topology or more than 2 routers are going to be covered in Packet Tracer. There's enhancements to Packet Tracer that are coming. And so those use cases or those labs are going to be covered through Packet Tracer. And the only new component in the labs is, again, we've introduced wireless, right, in the from the blueprint into the courseware into course number 2. And so for that training delivery, there will be a need for a generic or just a generalized wireless router, not a wireless LAN controller, nothing fancy here, but this is something that I believe existed at one time in the lab equipment expectations. But anyway, a plain vanilla WPA2 wireless router is all that's needed. That's the only new ingredient in the lab equipment expectations. So again, the scope and sequence document has all of this equipment definition. You can go there and take a look at that and just confirm and look at some of the specifics. So I think a key, I would be wondering if I'm an instructor, what does this mean to me? So here's what we've worked out from a mapping standpoint from version 6 to version 7. This is, read this as what you have today in terms of qualification in the first column, right, for version 6, what you will earn for qualification in version 7 based on what you have today, and then what is the incremental material or subject matter that's needed to really prepare you to deliver on these version 7 courses. So in the case of CCNA 1, as I said, pretty much equivalent, right? So there's no additional material. It's just a straight one-to-one mapping. If you teach CCNA version 6 or CCNA 1 version 6, the Intro to Networking course today, you can just continue with really, and the course might have some different look and feel. The platform will be a little bit updated and new, but it'll be very familiar. So there's no additional material associated with that mapping. In the case of CCNA 2, or if you have qualified for 1 and 2 for the academies who are focused on CSEM today, you will earn the new CCNA 1 and 2, but the incremental material that you'll need to absorb will come from CCNA 2 version 7. Okay, so there's, as I showed in that slide with the module names, there is incremental material that's needed to ramp and prepare for delivering on that version 7. If you have already qualified for 1 through 3 or 1 through 4, right, the last 2 rows here, you will be earning the qualification to deliver the CCNA version 7 new course 1, 2, and 3. In the case of instructors who are qualified for the 3, they will be expected to absorb the CCNA 3 version 7 plus the bridging course, right? The bridging course is the incremental material that what I showed earlier as the new or significantly changed material that'll be captured in a single course. And that's going to be used to, obviously for the instructor preparations as well as for obviously delivering to the students who need to span across that February 24th date that I showed where the transition occurs in the certification. And then for, I think, a lot of you who are already qualified to teach all 4 courses, really all of that delta or change information is going to exist in this bridging course. So you'll earn the qualification for the 1, 2, and 3, and you will be able to focus on the changes in this single bridging course that's shown over there on the right-hand side. Now, the bridging course is the bridging course and the use of the version 7 CCNA 2 and 3 are key ingredients for preparing and ramping into this new subject matter. The additional way in which you will benefit and prepare yourselves for delivering new courses is to focus on the IPD week offerings, right? So there was an IPD week back in May that included topics on automation. Those are archived. You can get access to those still, and that would be sort of some of the groundwork for the network automation and programmability changes that came to the certification. Coming up in September, the week of September 23rd, there's another session, right? And if you enroll in that, you will get again closer to, fulfilling that understanding of all of the changes and all of the new material that's been put into the CCNA. So strongly encourage folks to take advantage of that, to enroll in that class. The link here will be in the slides. And obviously those will be recorded as well. But that's sort of the bridging course is a preparation element. The IPD week is a second preparation element. And hopefully those, you can take advantage of both of those and use them as, becoming familiar with these topics. Again, some of these are brand new, never existed in the certification space previously. So, well worth taking advantage of these resources and options. And then the last point I wanted to touch on here was the migration, right? So you're going to have obviously different constraints within your academy. There's going to be different use cases that you're going to fall under. But as I mentioned at the beginning, on that timeline, right, the important date for course content availability is November of this year, right? And that's for the English versions of the courses. So the expectation there is all the way through that point, you'll just continue to deliver courseware using version 6. If you have, if you're focused in an academy where you're delivering the CCENT trainings for CCNA 1 and 2, after November, after the new material becomes available, if possible, right? This is dependent on the constraints and all of the academic rigor that's needed. But if possible, move to version 7. I mean, especially if you think about the version 6 CCNA 1 and version 7 CCNA 1 being the same, it's a very seamless transition, right? To capture the second course, you would just move to CCNA version 7, course number 2. For the academies, more commonly, I think this is a more common use case, who are actually involved in delivering all 4 courses, right? If you've done the delivered course 1 and 2, 1 or 2, I should say, and you're at that transition point in the early part of the calendar year, again, if you have the agility and the capability to flip to version 7, that's the preferred path. But if not, then the expectation is that you stay with the, or if there's an obligation from the academy to actually support student preparations for the CCENT, again, which runs out until July 31st. In those cases, you would want to stay with version 6 and then make the transition after that academic cycle. And if you're an academy who's more sort of midstream at the beginning of the calendar year, so you've done 1 and 2, for example, and now you're getting ready to start teaching CCNA 3 and 4, the recommendation there is to move to version version 7, course number 3, plus the bridging material, right? This bridging material, I talked about the new content, which is actually included in CCNA 2 as well as 3. Bring those together and combine that with the new CCNA 3 version 3 and shift over to that. Again, if that's not possible, if the program is built around the 4-course model, if it's impossible to make that kind of a quick turn, then continue with the version 6, and then this bridging course that I've talked about is really the mechanism for filling in the gaps and bringing students up to speed and preparing them for that new CCNA, again, that's going to become available after the end of February. So what I want to add to this is a very simplified migration strategy, and we are going to come forward with a more detailed and nuanced use case version of this over the next month. And so if you don't see something here that feels right, I know there's constraints, there's concerns about overlap. If you've already taught course number 2 and some of the material shows up in the new course number 3, that's going to be problematic. So we're going to work through all of that use case, what ifs and scenarios, and map all that out for you, just to give you some guidance that maybe is more applicable to your condition, and provide that to you, like I said, within the next month. So I think that is the end of my section, and have we left time for questions, hopefully?
Yeah, Greg, thank you so much. This is Richard Gordon. There's several questions that have come up on the chat that I've been trying to monitor. And, there was one question about the 3 courses that you mentioned, courses 1, 2, and 3, CCNA 1, 2, and 3. Are there course titles for those or names that you guys have come up with yet?
No, that is top of our to-do list. Obviously, the amount of change that's happened in course number 2 and 3 requires us to go back and rethink about what is the appropriate way to brand these. And so that's something that we will share, obviously, before they get released, and probably in the October timeframe. We'll actually put a stake in the ground and provide you with the official names for those courses.
Great, thanks. And then there were several instructors who, I don't know if they were lamenting or happy about there not being the EIGRP or multi-area OSPF or version 3, and I'm thinking those are all probably moving to CCNP where they used to be. Is that
yes? Correct? Yes, and that's another motivation for you to join this September IPD Week training, is the next level details, right? I didn't have time to go into that today here, but the next level details showing where those topics that exist in the CCNA today went to or removed completely from. All of that level of detail is going to be shared. And in the case you just mentioned, those dynamic routing protocols did get pushed up into the CCNP Enterprise Core curriculum.
Great. And then you mentioned that, and we were happy to hear that the CCENT exam was pushed out till July. That really works a lot better for our academic years that have long been scheduled. The spring schedule's already in the books, and so that really helps. But what about the ICND 2? The second exam, is that same, July 31st?
No.
Okay.
No, ICND 2 really is anchors to the full CCNA, and that,
right,
along with the composite exam, both end on February 24th.
Okay, so got it. All right. So they can anticipate if they'll take the new CCNA version 7 cert if they wait till next summer. Right. That's all that'll be available. Gotcha.
Right.
I don't know, Karen, I don't know if you saw any more. I know you were monitoring the chat too. If you saw any more questions that maybe I missed.
There's one from Michael Salvini about do you suggest a full semester for CCNA 1, then half semester 3 and 4 to complete in one academic year? So I think he's talking about how would you suggest breaking up the curriculum in a full year, CCNA 1 in one semester and then CCNA 2 and 3. Michael, I'm not sure if I'm getting that right. In half a semester each. Anyway, that's the question that's there. I think it probably would depend, Michael, on your educational level, if it's a high school, community college, and where your students are at. But Greg?
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
agree. Yep. Go ahead, Greg.
I think the only thing I can add to that is in the current version 6, right, I think there's agreement, or there's at least some understanding that the 4th course, right, the Connecting Networks course, is probably the one that has the least aggressive amount of material, right? It's probably can be compressed. If any of the courses can, that's the one. In the new framework, or in the new version 7, the development team has actually tried to make a pretty equal distribution. So each of these courses is built around a 65, 70-hour delivery expectation. It's not lopsided, in that one course is significantly less than the others.
Yeah, and I was just going to add that over the years there have been different approaches. Colleges, some of them offer them in 8-week courses. They still do that. They manage to get it through the material, and others need the semester. So I think that's still going to be some flexibility to be able to do that. And we're going to be all across the board on how they're delivered. And one thing we want to do is work together and learn best practices. And hopefully Karen and I can connect our faculty members together and get their ideas and share them. There's also a question there, several that have come up on the chat, but Ben Azadi has asked about whether, most schools like the 4-course sequence. It fits really well to their, and helps with a certificate meeting the required number of units. Is there a suggestion for the 4th course? I was thinking maybe CyberOps might be a good course to add there. I don't know, any other?
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, or a great question, and your suggestion is spot on. So I forgot to mention that in addition to providing you with the course names in the next month, we're working with the internal teams and trying to do a analysis of applicable courses in the portfolio, including things that are coming down the pike. Right, we've got the DevNet Associate course being developed that might also be a fit in that 4th slot. So, candidates certainly would be the CyberOps, the DevNet Associate, TBD on that one. The new CCNPs, right, that core course where some of the subject matter from the CCNA was moved up to the CCNP core, Enterprise Core, I should say. That's another possibility. Again, this sort of depends on the program and the level and what people feel is appropriate for that audience. But we're going to put together a recommendation there, or at least some suggestions, right, as far as what could fill that 4th slot.
Yeah, and thanks, Greg. And of course, as always, I mean, we are teaching ICT topics, and there are other technologies and courses that we've always taught alongside our networking courses. So that could be, cloud computing. Rick McDonald mentioned, looking at maybe AWS as a course for the cloud computing connection.
There was also, sorry, Richard.
Okay.
From Jason Howe about the switches used. I'm not sure. Greg, can you speak to that? He said in here that the end of life for the 2600 switches has been announced. Is there a plan to replace the 26 with something else? This is from Pasadena.
Yeah, so the 2960s are actually, there's a lot of different flavors of that. The model that we use in the equipment list has not been announced end of life yet. The Catalyst 9200, which is sort of the replacement for the 2K Catalyst series switch, is we are going to consider that as an option or an alternative. But for the next cycle, certainly between now and the next revision, the Catalyst 2960s are going to remain available. They're not going to be end of life. Like every product, Cisco is resistant to getting pinned down on when the end of life will be for a product or solution. But the product managers have told me, at least, that there won't be anything announced sooner than 2 to 3 years, and then there's a availability, support time that goes beyond that. So for the short term or medium term, the 2960 is totally on point. And like I said, when we work through the options and we bring the Catalyst 9200 in as a consideration, academies who want to invest and really future-proof themselves could look to that device. But There's a lot to sort out there. The new switches are, a different model as far as the licensing. There's a lot of change associated with the new switches, a lot of the new network devices. So we have to get that all sorted out and make it compatible and operationally friendly for the academies.
So we're capturing, there are a lot of questions here regarding equipment, and that's certainly a concern of institutions that have to then invest in that equipment for their students. And
Right.
so we'll try to collect those and get those out to you, Greg, and maybe you can find out more after the fact as well. I think we're running a little bit out of time here. Nicole and Steve, I think we're coming towards the end.
Right, and of course we'll be posting this video, the chapterized, the transcript eventually, and the slides on our website for those of you who want to share it later with your friends or whatever. And unless there are any more questions, we're going to wrap it up. And I want to thank Greg Cote, Richard, and also Karen Stanton for the way they've been supporting the California community colleges for a number of years. And next week, I just want to plug our next conference will be NetLab Virtual Labs Update with the latest from NDG. Sean Monson will be hosting that educator series. Sean, do you have a minute to say something about what that's going to be?
Yeah, as you mentioned, NetLab will be here next week to talk about some of their new offerings and specifically focus on their cyber competition, their online cyber competition offering. They'll have some of their customers that are using that product come in and talk about how they're using their online cyber competition product in the classroom.
Okay, so that should be very interesting. And with that, we can wrap up today. Karen, do you have a last statement?
So, Steve, I did have one last thing about WASTC, if I could just share that in just a minute.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. So Karen and I are help with the Western Academy Support and Training Center, and we have many of our members that are on the call today, and just wanted to let you know that we're, we have plans, and we do support almost 300 academies right now, and 67 of the 114 community colleges are Cisco academies, as well as a number of high schools and universities as well. And Karen organizes and coordinates all of our instructor training schedule. It happens year-round, and we are gearing up already. Our instructor trainers are poring over the scope and sequence of the new courses and already mapping out their plans for how to train instructors both through bridging and also through you could always sit in on our courses even if you're already certified to learn the new technologies as well. So here's our contact information. There's the website. Training will be posted, and Karen's working on organizing the new training for the CCNA as well as CCMP when it comes up. Karen, you want to add anything to that last slide?
Hi, yeah, I have been working with our instructor trainers, and Greg, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that our instructor trainers will be getting some first look, especially at the new content that's going to be coming in. They obviously already know the technology for everything we've been teaching in the past. So this fall, as soon as we get those new looks, our instructor trainers will be adding that content to the instructor training classes we have that we will be teaching during the fall. So I feel pretty confident we'll be able to get you in a good place for running the new curriculum. And then also Richard and I are looking at being able to offer some really excellent refresher classes. So you will be certainly able to if you're already qualified in CCNA 1 through 4, or you saw the list of classes that you can teach depending on what you're teaching now, you certainly won't be required to do any instructor training. But if you would like to see the new content with an instructor trainer, we will be putting together some refresher classes for that. So, yeah, we're really looking forward to doing that. I've been working with my instructor trainers, trying to look forward and see what we can do. So you can look forward to those sort of offerings from us moving forward. And there was one other, I don't know if it was a request or a suggestion from Greg out in Arizona, another Greg, suggesting that since CCNA security, it will have a badge associated with it, and the course isn't going away. But he thought it would be an excellent opportunity to add the CCNP security as an ongoing course. So that was just a comment for you, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great, thank you. I might just forward his note to you too. So I think that's all I'm seeing at the moment.
Great.
There's a few others, and maybe
Thanks,
we can
Karen.
connect with those offline. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks, Steve. And yeah, happy to help support this program and go into my 23rd year.
Okay, well, thank you all for showing up today and joining our conference every Friday at 10 o'clock, except for holidays. And look at our schedule and join us next week. And thanks once again to Nicole Sherman, our producer, for putting all this on, and for Greg for spending his time with us today. Thank you very much.